Borthakur IAS Academy, an endeavor of excellence.
Borthakur IAS Academy.
Hello everyone, welcome to Borthakur's IAS Academy, Northeast's premier institute for UPSC, APSC and NPSC preparations. I'm your friend Atreyi and today I'm here with another segment of Current Affairs 365 dated 14th of July 2021. This is your one-stop solution for any news and updates which will help you prepare for your civil services examination, and along with that it is also going to be helpful for any other Assam state government services. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for any further updates related to all government services. You can also follow us on Facebook as well as Instagram. Now, coming to the first news of today, it is related to Indian polity, which is about the border dispute between the two northeastern states of Assam and Mizoram. Several IED, that is improvised explosive device blasts, were carried out recently inside the Kachar district of Assam, allegedly by certain miscreants from Mizoram. And these blasts, they signal the re-emergence of the long unresolved border dispute between both the states. The boundary issue between Assam and Mizoram existed since the formation of Mizoram, first as a union territory in the year 1972 and then when it was recognized as a full-fledged state in the year 1987. During the colonial times, Mizoram was known as Lushai Hills, which was a district of Assam. Mizoram was granted statehood in the year 1987 by the State of Mizoram Act of 1986. And Assam became a constituent state of India in the year 1950. And it lost much of its territory to new states which emerged within its borders between the early 1960s and the early 1970s. Now, as I have already mentioned, that this boundary issue between both the states, it dates back to the colonial era, where inner lines were demarcated according to the administrative needs of the British Raj. Assam and Mizoram disputes, it stems from two notifications which were passed under British era. First was of the notification of the year 1875, which differentiated the Lushai Hills from the plains of Kachar. And second was the notification of 1933. It demarcated a boundary between the Lushai Hills and Manipur. Now, the Mizo leaders, they were against this demarcation, which was notified in the year 1933. As per them, the Mizo society was not consulted before taking this decision. However, on the other hand, the Assam government, they follows the 1933 demarcation. This is the main reason of a differing perception of about the border between both the states, and is also the major point of conflict. There is a 164.6 kilometer interstate border which separates Assam and Mizoram. There are three Assam districts, of Kachar, Hailakandi and Karimganj, which shares a border with the Kolasip, Mamit and Aizawl districts of Assam. Moreover, more than that, these two states, they follows naturally occurring barriers of hills, rivers, valleys and forests. Also, in the northeast's complex boundary equation, clashes between the states of Assam and Mizoram residents, these are less frequent than when compared to other neighboring states of Assam. So, if we look at the overall condition of interstate dispute in our country, then this border dispute is not a new thing. It is one of the major reasons for any interstate dispute in our country. For example, Karnataka and Maharashtra, they both lay claim to Belgaum, and every now and then this matter comes up. Then the Northeastern Areas Act of 1971, because of which the political map of Northeastern India changed, as the establishment of new states like Manipur, Tripura and Meghalaya, they came up. This reorganization has resulted in many boundary disputes in the Northeastern region. Another major issue is the matter of migration. There have been violent agitations in some states over migrants and job seekers from other states. The main reason here is because of the existing resources and the employment opportunities which are not enough to meet the needs of growing population. Then there are disputes over sharing water resources. The most long-standing and contentious interstate issue has been this particular issue, which is sharing of river waters. Most of the Indian rivers, these are interstate, they flow through more than one state, and due to an increase in demand for water, a number of interstate disputes over sharing of river waters have surfaced in recent times. We can solve this boundary dispute between the states by using satellite mapping of the actual border locations. Then we can also work on reviving the interstate council that can be an option for resolution of any interstate dispute. Okay, under the article 263 of Indian Constitution, the interstate council is expected to inquire and advise on certain disputes, discuss subjects which are common to all the states, and finally make recommendations for any better policy coordination. Similarly, the zonal councils, they also can be revived to discuss the matters of common concern to states in each zone. Now, the second news is about fertilizer self-sufficiency. Here we will see what all the government is doing in order to, promote the use of alternative fertilizers. We will have a look at certain policies and initiatives and schemes which are here to introduce alternative sources of fertilizers. So recently, the Minister of Chemicals and Fertilizer has reviewed the initiatives of the Department of Fertilizer for making India Atmanirbhar in fertilizers. Here, the government is planning to liberalize the MDA policy, which is Market Development Assistance Policy, in order to promote alternative fertilizers, use and promotion of alternative fertilizers. So this MDA policy was earlier limited to only the city compost. There have been certain demands to expand this policy by incorporating organic wastes like biogas, green manure, organic compost, solid or liquid slurry, etc. This expansion is definitely going to fully complement the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Other initiatives includes the neem coating of urea, which was made mandatory by Department of Fertilizers to all the domestic producers, that 100% urea, they are going to produce 100% urea as neem coated urea. There are many benefits of this particular neem coated urea, which are improvement in soil health. Then there is a reduction in usage of plant protection chemicals. Also, you will see a subsequent reduction in pest and disease attack towards the crops. Finally, due to the slow release of nitrogen use efficiency of this neem coated variant, it increases in the reduced consumption of urea as compared to normal urea. Then we have the new urea policy of 2015, whose major objective was to maximize the indigenous urea production, also to promote energy efficiency in the urea units, which will rationalize the subsidy burden on Government of India. Then government announced a new investment policy of 2012 in January 2013, and there were certain amendments which were made in the 2014 to facilitate fresh investment in the urea sector in order to make India self-sufficient in urea. The Government of India also approved a policy on promotion of city compost, which was notified by the Department of Fertilizers in 2016, which granted market development assistance worth rupees 1500 for scaling up of production and consumption of the city compost. Fertilizer companies, they are making city compost, they are marketing city compost, which are covered under the direct benefit transfer for fertilizers. Then some other schemes includes the use of space technology in fertilizer sector and the nutrient based subsidy scheme. Nutrient based subsidy scheme has been implemented from April 2010, and under this scheme a fixed amount of subsidy has been decided on an annual basis. It will be provided on each grade of subsidized P&K fertilizer. P&K stands for phosphatic and potassic fertilizers, depending on its nutrient content. India's fertilizer consumption in the financial year of 2020 was about 61 million tons. Since non-urea variants, these are quite high in cost, many farmers, they prefer to use more urea than they are actually needed. So now government has taken a number of measures in order to reduce the urea consumption. It introduced this neem coated variant to reduce illegal diversion of urea for non-agricultural usage, and has also stepped up the promotion of organic and zero budgeting farming. Now moving ahead to the next news, it is about the Global Biodiversity Framework post 2020. Here we will see how this framework is going to act for well-being of human beings and also for towards a healthy planet. Okay, then we will see the purpose of this framework, and finally the goals and targets that it has set for itself. The United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity has demanded an additional flow of fund towards the developing countries worth rupees $200 billion. This is done for various sources to manage the nature through the year 2030. Convention of Biological Diversity is a legally binding treaty to conserve biodiversity, and this has been in force since the year 1993. It has three main objectives. First, conservation of biological diversity. Second is sustainable use of components of biological diversity. And thirdly, fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of utilization of genetic resources. Nearly all the countries have ratified it, and the CBD Secretariat, it is based in Montreal, Canada, and it operates under the United Nations Environment Program. Now coming to what is biodiversity, okay, because of its benefits, it has become a fundamental to human well-being as well as a healthy planet. However, despite of all the ongoing efforts to save biodiversity, it is deteriorating worldwide, and this decline is projected to continue or even worsen under the business as usual scenarios. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, it builds on the strategic plan for biodiversity for the decade 2011 to 2020. The main purpose of this particular framework is that it is going to be a global guiding force to protect nature and also to retain its essential services for humans for the next decade, that is 2020 to 2030. Then this framework is all set at maintaining certain targets for the convention's 196 parties in order to develop national and regional goals and targets. This will be done to update the national strategies and action plans as needed, and also to facilitate regular monitoring and review of progress at the global level. Then the framework aims to spur urgent and transformative actions by governments and all of society in order to contribute towards the objectives of Convention on Biological Diversity and its protocols. This also aims to ensure the right capacity building of the communities in order to take up conservation measures to meet the goals. Now coming to the goals and targets, the new framework have 4 goals to achieve by 2050. These are to halt the extinction and decline of biodiversity, to enhance and retain nature services to human by conserving, to ensure fair and equitable benefits to all from use of genetic resources, and finally to close the gap between available financial and other means of implementation. The 2030 Action Targets Framework has 21 action-oriented targets for urgent actions over the decade of 2030. And this framework of global biodiversity post-2020, it is a fundamental contribution towards the implementation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. At the same time, the progress towards Sustainable Development Goals. The next news is related to science and technology. It is about the suborbital flight. A 6-person crew on Virgin Galactic undertook a brief trip to the edge of space, which is also known as suborbital flight. Now this news is also important because it includes Sirisha Bandla. Sirisha Bandla is an astronaut who is born in India, and she is the 3rd woman of Indian origin to go to space after Kalpana Chawla and Sunita Williams. Now coming to this suborbital flight or trajectory, it is when an object, it travels at a horizontal speed of about 28,000 or more, it goes into orbit once it is above the atmosphere. And the satellites, they need to reach that threshold speed or orbital velocity in order to orbit Earth. Okay. Such a satellite would accelerate towards the Earth due to gravity, but its horizontal movement is fast enough to offset the downward motion. And any object which travels slower than around 28,000 km per hour, it must return back to Earth eventually. So any object that launches to space but does not reach that sufficient horizontal velocity, what they do, they stay in space for some time and keeps falling back to the Earth. So hence they fly in a suborbital trajectory. It means that all these vehicles, they will cross that boundary of space, but they will not be going fast enough to stay in space once they get there. So this is the suborbital trajectory. Now, what is the significance of such flights? It would provide increased flight access for any designed innovation and experimental manipulation due to high projected flight rates. There are also many research which are going on regarding the suborbital flights. They could be used as an alternative to the parabolic flights in aeroplanes that space agencies currently use in order to stimulate your zero gravity. Now, what is zero gravity? Simply, it is a state of condition of weightlessness. They are also going to be far less expensive than carrying experiments and people to the International Space Station. So this was all for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it will be helpful. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'll see you all again tomorrow with another segment of Current Affairs 365, only on Borthakur's IAS Academy, Northeast's premier institute for UPSC, APSC and NPSC preparations. Till then, take care, keep learning.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS Academy